Hey, guess it's still the weekend if you're watching this on the weekend. 2 episodes in as many days rushed to publication because I just find it so fascinating. Today's guest is Alexandros Marinos, who is a Seattle-based entrepreneur or startup kind of guy. And recently he started a project called Better Skeptics. And at the Better Skeptics website is this ground truth challenge where he set up some rules and a protocol to strain facts out of competing claims, specifically claims around Bret Weinstein, claims made about Bret Weinstein and claims made by Bret Weinstein specifically about the COVID vaccine, the IVM possibility of being a curative or something of that sort, and also how various different institutional structures are pushing us toward one solution and denigrating anybody who problematizes that. So Bret Weinstein's been talking a lot about COVID for the past year and has been steadily getting in more and more heat, and people that were very close to him in this IDW sphere, such as Sam Harris and Claire Lehman, who is the publisher of Quillette, or the main editor of Quillette, have both argued or attacked Bret for his position. So what is going on with how we're making sense of these issues? Alexandros has stepped up to the plate with this ground truth challenge, and I invite him onto my podcast to talk about the different claims and all this different information and how we can make sense out of all this information or disinformation or misinformation, so on and so forth. It was great to have him on. I hope to have him back in the future to talk about his startup kind of lifestyle. So without further ado, here is Alexandros Marinos. So how did you get into this conversation then? Or wait, what's your base like of operations? What do you like do and concern yourself with mostly?
So I run an IT startup of sorts. Like I got, random stuff like this lying around my, workspace. And I just, that's kind of my thing. But because we're remote, that means that, we've basically developed tools. We're almost a decade in at this point. There's been a few changes over time, but the whole story is about a decade in. And, we've been remote all the time. So we've been building quite a few tools, I think, to make sense of the world and, different perspectives from like people who are really smart and have different bits of the elephant, especially with hard technical problems. The system is down. Several people can see different bits. We all have to come together and like quickly make sense of the facts and whatnot. So it kind of, I've been watching, Bret Weinstein, a lot of these people actually, Sam, Bret, just your standard sort of, podcast listener person. And definitely through the pandemic, a lot of Bret, a lot of Dark Horse in general. And at some point, it just struck me that this is really strange, basically. That he's putting together a hypothesis that is quite impactful, quite rich, quite specific, quite falsifiable. And that when I try to, like, between you, me, and everybody in the world, I don't want him to be right. You understand? Like, this is quite a bad scenario that he is describing. But I'm trying to find out why he's not right, and everything I get back is noise and just like, but he's terrible, he's irresponsible, he's like, well, everybody knows that he has no credibility, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay. And then so when Yuri put out his piece on Quillette, it was like, okay, fine. Finally, somebody who I respect is putting something out on a medium I respect. Surely they figured it out, right? So I start reading this thing, and I was like, this can't be it. Like surely this is not the best we have, because this is pretty bad. And that's kind of how I got into it. So I did the analysis just to, first of all, the reason I did the analysis actually is to tie myself to the math, because I could not finish it. So I said, look, if I start a Twitter thread on it, I'll have to finish it, and I'll have to go line by line. So if there's something there beyond the tone and the snark, I'll find it. Like I truly want to find, the chinks in the armor here. And it was everywhere I pushed, it just crumbled. Like it was like I could not go one level deep into pretty much anything that they were bringing up as counter arguments. Half of it was strawman, so they didn't even stand up. But like the ones that were accurate sort of attempts would crumble. And you're like, okay, well, that's not it. And then I started asking people proactively, tell me what the problem is. And it was all kind of like, terrible person, irresponsible, blah, blah, blah. How dare they, blah, blah, blah. It's credited. And I'm like, so whenever I try to dig in, one particular guy, I think that was kind of like it for me. Because like, look in this podcast, I was like, I want specifics. I want to tell me where, what they said, and why it's wrong, right? And send me somewhere in the podcast. Like this podcast, minute 33, whatever. Listen to the first 10 minutes, which is already quite a bit, but screw it. I'll do it. I listen. I'm like, it doesn't say what you says it says. And it's like, oh, no, go to minute 67. Fine. I was like, it doesn't say what you said it says. It says this. And it's like, well, prove it to me, because I can't clearly prove to you anything with the transcript. So this was a Kirsch quote, right? One of the guests that Bret has, who is very loud and very sort of brash. And I was like, okay, now he got me dead to rights. Surely, if somebody has screwed the pooch, like that's where it's probably is, right? And I sit and type out the transcript. I was like, all right, if it is, I'll prove it to him, and I'll do the exercise to prove it to myself that I can do that. So I type it out, and I just look at it, and I was like, this guy who comes out across like very brash has 3 qualifiers and has explicitly said exactly what he means and has, couched it correctly, everything like, precisely beautiful. And I'm like, if this isn't it doesn't exist at that point. I'm like, and now my confidence that the material is solid jumps and jumps and jumps. If the thing that I thought was the weakest link, like where the bodies are probably buried, is this clean when you see it written, I'm starting to get a feeling that it's probably going to be. And then we did this challenge to, okay, like that's the kind of what more can I do? Like, what's the next level of scrutiny I can apply to this?
Mm-hmm. Well, just to kind of do a soft reset.
Yes.
What is Bret's position, and why is it so dangerous?
Okay, so I can tell you my synthesis of the position. To my knowledge, it's not been all put together. There are these 4 transcripts that we put together. You probably can add the conversation with Yuri and the conversation with Gerrit van der Busch. Within that sort of frame is what I'm talking about, right? So if you take that frame from the point of view of a speaker that is not necessarily me, but not necessarily Bret, like I'm just going to sort of give you a hypothesis of what I think it's saying, right? You've got a virus that may have leaked from the lab. Maybe. You've got a situation where, so Gert's position is that the way in which we're doing the vaccination is a really bad idea evolutionarily speaking, because what you have is a lot of people and you're randomly vaccinating, which means that at any given point, you've got 2 graphs essentially of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated meshed. So the virus, let's say that it spreads to the unvaccinated, not the vaccinated initially, it gets, millions and millions and millions of probability, chances basically to jump and evolve. And then going from vaccinated to vaccinated, even if it's low impact, it gets more and more chances basically to evade the protection that we've built so painfully with the vaccine. But then people are like booster, right? Fine, we can keep going until we push this out. The problem with that though is that then we have a very unclear sense of the side effects of the vaccine. So there's this virus database, right? And when they put out the vSafe system to go with it. Now I get into systems that I understand, right? I'm a computer scientist, and I build online services. So that's now the territory where I am the expert, and others have to have to play off base. When they put it together, they said we're going to hold ourselves to the highest standard, right? We got to get all the data for everything that's happening. We're going to be extremely precise, blah 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 blah, high standard. Okay, so what's happening now? We see a lot of bad events in that system, which doesn't mean that the vaccines cause those bad events, but they are there. They happened in proximity of the vaccination.
And that system is a record of people self-reporting complications of any medical type that happened after the vaccine?
roughly. I couldn't precisely tell you because I've been digging into it and I can't fully understand. It appears to be self-reporting, but there's some medical hand in it. A lot of people are reporting that it's very hard to put things in there. It's really hard to know what that means. What I know is that system was put there so we get a signal if something is going wrong, and whatever standards I've heard for a signal are being met. You see what I mean? Like it's a very, very blurry signal, but every time I dig into it, I feel better. I feel worse. So there's like some sense of what is happening around vaccination. So maybe, like, to put it differently, right? I run a startup. If my analytics team shows up and says, we're going to get the system together and it's going to work like this, and this is the data you're going to have at the end, I'm like, would you like to get a different job, maybe in a different field, perhaps, because this is not how we do this work, right? Like, if you care about getting good data, you don't do it this way. So,
by which you mean some sort of motivated reasoning, or?
I'm not saying that I'm saying that not enough care was put into that system. I'm pretty confident in that. Like, if we truly cared about getting good data, this is not, maybe it's overconfidence, right? Maybe it's like, it's fine. It's a vaccine. How bad could it be? We've been doing this forever, even though this is different technology. But it's using the same word, which is possibly category error, but let's just flow with it. So there's that part there. And then what was the fourth part? And then there's the I word. Can I say it, or do you get demonetized?
You can say it. IVM. We can just call it IVM.
Sure. So there's the whole IVM thing. There's what I consider to be essentially a Bayesian signal of effectiveness for various things. So you look at the various studies. It's back and forth, right? There's some that are getting pushed forward, they're getting retracted, it's not peer reviewed. There's a lot of questions, a lot of asterisks, but there's a lot of data of different varieties, which in my book is a good thing, right? You want, stereo sound. Like when you make a self-driving car, they have this thing they call sensor fusion. So you want your video and your radar and your LiDAR and like all the things to be giving you the same picture. That is far better than just the camera, because the camera could have a camera bug. Right, the LiDAR can have a LiDAR bug. The sound, the microphone can have a microphone bug. But they could not all have a bug in their technical implementation that will create the same artifact at the back. And that is exceedingly difficult, right? So You really want multimodal data. So that's what we seem to have, and it's all blurry, right? But at the same time, it's not getting funded to get the data, and it's not, and everybody's pushing back on anybody who has data. So there's like an active campaign to sort of, for instance, right, there's the test-Lari meta-analysis, which is something that Bret has put out and helped, has sort of pointed at, and then did another podcast with Tess to go through it, especially in light of one of the papers they were using had a potentially serious sort of data quality issue and got retracted, and there was questions about how big is this problem for the meta-analysis.
There was plagiarism or something like that.
There was the thing is, like, the professor himself says, like, I will defend my data. Now, this is my neck of the woods, Eastern Mediterranean. A lot of people say a lot of things. I don't know what to tell you, but it's been retracted. So that study has to be discounted, and they were seeing what the impact is of removing that one. It was like a fairly large one. So they want, and the thing is, okay, that's how science works, though, right? We put out results, we test them. There was the whole replication crisis. There's Ioannidis saying, like, why 90 whatever % of all medical science studies are wrong. That's how we do it. We put out things, we check them, we replicate them, we try again. This is, to me, this is not like some sort of, oh my God, fraud. First time we see this. This is just par for the course. You take the data you have, you try to make signal. Some of it is bad, some of it is good. You keep going. Mm-hmm. So that meta-analysis, though, took forever to get published the first time around, because if I recall correctly, they tried to get it out in the Lancet, and the Lancet basically said, we won't do it, not because it failed peer review, we just won't do it, and they had to go to another journal and go through peer review there and get published. So there's a lot of friction in getting that data out. Then if you're not peer reviewed, they're like, but it's a preprint. It's like, yeah, but again, it's like you got this thing, right? And they've chopped up the one leg, and they're like, "You're a terrible sprinter." Yes, I know. You've debilitated me, and now you're saying I can't run very fast. Like everybody who says seems to be some signal here, but the data isn't clear. I want that person to show me where they're campaigning for a bigger study, because this is the only consistent position for somebody who thinks there's something that might work, right? And most of the people that are like, yeah, maybe something, but we don't really know. It's kind of like a commitment to like, there's only one solution, and that solution is going to be the one that we're going to go with. Which again, I'm not saying it's not. It's just the uncertainty that gets right. So basically, what Bret's approach to if my understanding is correct, is this: if you use a combined approach, right? You use what works, where it safely works, because you have good data that it safely works, plus a blend of other strategies. You can create a wall so that you stop the evolution. You don't get further variance, and you can sort of gradually wipe it out of territory by territory. And it's going to be, again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But you can sort of get rid of this eventually completely. And a lot of people have resigned, I think, to the fact that it's going to be endemic, and they kind of he gets the kind of reaction that I feel is. I see it in my field all the time. When I propose we do something crazy, right? For instance, my team ported a specific technology to small devices for the first time that was used in the data center. The first thing we heard is like, this is absurd. Why would you do this? Why you never need this, blah, 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 blah. Now it's a standard everybody's doing, right? But you just get the disbelief, the how dare you, the kind of like a weird sort of cached reaction that isn't, it's not very useful at the end, but it does kill innovation. In fields I know about. So it's like this idea basically is too wild to consider. That's kind of what you're hearing. It's just too out there. We're not even going to bother. How did I do for like giving you the whole picture?
So to try to do what I can to summarize what you were trying to summarize, there's kind of basically 3 issues. One is the way in which across the globe we are trying to stop the virus through vaccination. And the way that the vaccine is being rolled out is allowing for much more potential evolution of different variants, just because of the way that it's being rolled out. So there's that issue. Then there's the issue of
directed towards the vaccine specifically. Evolution happens always, right? Like no matter what you do, unless you eliminate it, it'll evolve. But it evolves in a specific direction, which is particularly concerning. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. And then the second issue that you brought up was the tracking of the effect that the vaccine might be having on the population, because there's this database that's supposed to be collating all this information and presenting information so that we can see whether or not the vaccine is having negative effects. That data set or that tool is not efficient, and it's there's something murky about that. So we aren't getting a good signal about how the vaccine might be negatively impacting people. So even asking that question is putting you in anti-vax territory, because of course the vaccine could never have any negative consequences. So there's that issue. And then the third issue is the possible beneficial, there's 2 words, it either cures or prevents. There's technical medical terms for IVM. Sure. It can either slow down the spread or slow down the consequences of having the virus, or even cure you, right?
We don't even have to go that specific. There could be other things that we're just focused our gaze on one solution, and we're just basically everything else is treated as a possible distraction, and therefore quieted down, essentially. Okay.
So even if we ignore every other possible solution, the way that we're using this one solution is possibly dangerous, or I guess counterproductive because of the evolutionary.
It's compromising the solution itself. So I'm not personally. I think we're not seeing the sort of thing that would mean that like it's a net negative, right? What we're seeing is that we don't know what the trade-off exactly is and who. So now cautiously, people in the UK, I believe, have started saying maybe for the youngest children, this particular thing might not be ideal. Like you're seeing very careful whispers happening that basically there's a line somewhere, right, where it's like, these people should absolutely go for it. These people should be a little more careful, whatever. Like, I don't actually know because, again, we don't have the data. The thing is, like, we're not looking at other things, which is kind of we, the species, of course, are. I mean, the official authorities with all the funding and budget behind them are very narrowly focusing on one approach, which, if the hypothesis that I am assembling, from what I'm hearing, is correct, we're also compromising it in the sort of somewhat haphazard way that we're deploying it.
Okay. And then added to that is that you have the official bodies going all in on this one solution and maybe doing it kind of ineptly and then not really having the best tool available for recording or tracking the consequences. But you also have like this second tier social climate of demeaning or actively people who aren't representing any official body are now kind of going after anybody who's, such as Bret Weinstein, is proposing, is problematizing this one solution, which makes it even more difficult to verify whether or not Bret is being a bad actor or not, or if he's barking up the wrong tree, or even if he is being dangerous because of how powerful his podcast is to cause people to. One person said that there's blood on his hands. Anyway, so there's that whole stuff. So you've gone after, due to some strange impulse within you for truth or justice or something. I don't know. You probably have your own motivations. We don't need to get into that. But you've tried to track down the best possible criticisms of Bret Weinstein's position. Having not found that in the Quillette article or in other sources, you've made a kind of a fun experiment or a contest or some way to generate critique, strong critique. That's where you're at right now.
So, yeah, basically, both me and my wife have been sort of together in all of this, right, and been talking about it, and sort of, she's got a journalism background and a startup background. Sort of the startup background is, common with me, as in she has her own startup, but we both have that. And yeah, we kind of said, well, this should do it. Surely if we, and the idea was like, gives people something that will pay for their time. Like if we're asking people to do research, right, and to document things, and they come up and they're like, no, I know there's something wrong, but I don't have the time, I can't be bothered, whatever. Give them something that if they bring up something legitimate, that you say, thank you, I appreciate what you bring up. So we put that together. I selected folks that had either been recommended to me by others who are not necessarily Bret's best friends, but I thought that the people were legitimate, or a friend of mine specifically who is anti-Bret. So if you look at his Twitter priors, because of other issues, he doesn't. Anti-Bret is a very hard word. He's definitely not positively,
a Bret fan.
Definitely not a Bret fan. But a person whose integrity I trust. Right. I would put my life in his hands in terms of integrity. So I'm like, this is perfect. I'm going to, get these people. I'm going to create a protocol. I'm actually staying out of the challenge itself, right? I'm running the mechanism, and usually I intervene to help certain criticisms get through, because the process, maybe it's the first time we run it, maybe it's a little bit less understood than it should be. So I try to create lubrication, but I try not to influence the judges. I try not to whatever, just to see what comes through it, right? And yeah, a couple of things have come through. So the way it works is there's two stages. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, please.
So the way
and what's it called, so people can check it out?
Right. So the account we have is called Better Skeptics on Twitter. It's betterskeptics.com for the website. There is the challenge. It's called the Ground Truth Challenge. There we've got the announcement, and we've got some progress reports from as it's ongoing. Some clarifications about the rules that we're putting out, et cetera, et cetera. The rules, by the way, are on GitHub, and we accept pull requests. If anybody has ideas of how to improve it, they can just say, hey, what do you do this? Doesn't mean we'll take it, but we'll look at it. So we created this challenge, and it has essentially two stages, right? The first stage, it's very much, it's going to be reminiscent of other things we've seen. So the first stage is attack, right? Challenge. Like, I think, and it has two kinds of challenges you can do. One is unsupported statement. So we've basically done all the transcripts for these 4 podcasts that we're focused on. 11 hours of speech, which is kind of ridiculous to think about how much surface we're opening up, right? And there's two kinds of challenges you can do. One is unsupported claim, which means sort of, hey, they're saying like X or Y is cytotoxic, whatever, where is this coming from? Fair. And the other one is falsification. Falsification is not verification. It doesn't mean like they can't prove this is true, but it's more like I can definitely tell you this is false. So for instance, what I did with the Sam Harris podcast, right? They said the EUA has this requirement. I'm like, here's the page. It has that requirement, which you said that it doesn't have. What gives? Right.
That podcast was such a train wreck. I'm sorry.
I mean, it didn't sound as bad to me as when I went through it line by line. I was like, this is just completely crumbling again, right? That's falsification. It's like to say they said this, and I have positive evidence to prove that it is not the case.
Okay.
So these are the two kinds of challenges you can do. And the referees sort of rate that how effective your challenge was. So if it's like falsification, is it logical falsification? This could not be true in any universe. Is it a physical, possibility? As in, like, it couldn't happen. Like, if I said, like, Benjamin Boyce is 3 meters tall, that, is on, human biology, whatever. Like, there's 3 meters is what, 9 feet or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm 9 feet in somebody's head, I'm sure.
There you go. So yeah, I have to say it's not metaphorical. Anyway, so that's kind of so the referees kind of say, okay, what kind of or is it like a high likelihood, right? Like that it's false.
Okay.
So and then you go lower into like kind of maybe create some doubt, but not enough to be said, falsification. And by the way, the reason for this kind of standard is Wikipedia went and said, Bret Weinstein traffics in misinformation, whatever it is that they put on his page, right? That's a positive claim. You have to be able to prove what you're saying. It's not like he said some things we didn't like, or like maybe somebody gets the impression that something untrue was said. Like you got to be able to point what the misinformation was, right? Which is kind of the standard we're using. So that's the first stage. And the second stage is we put it out on Twitter and we're like, okay, there's this sort of challenge and it's this, and please give us the refutation of this challenge, right? Maybe I say, for instance, just to use a Topol example, right? Topol says, in a pandemic, the requirements are these. And I look at the page, and I'm like, that's not what I see. And somebody else could say, no, there's another page that is this pandemic special page that says that. And therefore, your attack looked reasonable when judged on its own. But actually, if you look at the totality of what we have access to, that's not true. And then that goes back to the referees for a second grading of like, okay, now with all of the evidence in hand, so we have both the one side and the other, does this still seem like a falsification sort of that stands or not? Or unsupported claim, again, you have a chance to find the support, right, to find the citation. And if it can't be found, it's like, okay, well, we don't know where this is coming from, right? So these are the two kinds of dings you can have on the material we're targeting. And then we're going to do a final thing, which is like we're taking Paul Graham's disagreement hierarchy, which is I don't have it off the top of my head, but basically it's kind of like a pyramid, right? So at the bottom is like, you're an asshat. That's like literally in the infographic. Like, not even ad hominem, right? Just like vile, rather. And then it's like ad hominem, and then there's like contradiction, and you get to like refutation. So you take off one part of the logical claim, but the DH7, disagreement hierarchy level 7, is refutation of the central point, right? So you've taken out, you've come at a claim that is so central to the argument being made that the argument collapses, right? And the rationalist community has built DH8, which is steel manning, which is you take what they said, you turn it into its best or worst possible version, like the most sort of dangerous form, and then you refute that.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is sort of the things that come through this pipeline, we're going to rate them like, are they a nitpick? Are they a significant sort of correction required, but doesn't really sort of get at the heart of what is being said? Or is it, straight to the heart, eliminates an entire branch of this sort of structure that we described?
Okay. And to follow like that number 8, the rationalist special of super claim decimation. What is the most dangerous thing, with all that you know now and all that you've gathered, what is the most dangerous thing possible that Bret Weinstein and Heather and Dark Horse podcast could be doing?
I mean, the DHA is sort of steel manning. So how do I approach this? You want to make the strongest argument.
The strongest argument.
I'm not a biologist.
Okay, yeah, all right. But from what you've gathered, why, other than the cultural climate, if we can diffuse all the emotionality, which is really confusing, and I don't know why the people that are being so emotional are being so emotional, because they have founded their reputations on not being emotional. So it's just kind of weird. But if we take that aside and we say there is something dangerous going on with Bret Weinstein problematizing the vaccine, promoting ivermectin, and I guess maybe inciting an anti-vax army or something like that. What is so dangerous about Bret Weinstein problematizing this?
I think it's. I think the fear, if I'm sort of steel manning the critics, is that it creates doubt on this one plan that we all have to get behind and execute. Which we should all coordinate and do this thing, which is fair. Like, if that was true, that would be a bad thing. However, what I'm not seeing is the self-criticism of, yes, we should have done a better job here. Yes, the data that's getting collected isn't right. Yes. We are not putting as much effort as we should on other approaches that appear to be working, or at least have some signal. The self-criticism is lacking. It's like, you are a heretic and you shall die. If Sam Harris was religious, he would have claimed demon possession, and I feel that would be more honest than schizophrenia. That kind of thing, like, it just gets to me. And in my I had heard somebody say that in wartime, right, humans tend to throw their principles away. They were talking about the Japanese internment camps, where the whole society, when peace comes back, they kind of see what they did, and they regret the extremes that which they allowed themselves to get to by throwing their principles away, and it wasn't really worth it to begin with, right? It wasn't like, okay, look, we have to do this. It's more like, just go crazy, do whatever, everything must be done. If it has a slightest chance of helping, we should just go for it, no matter what it is. Societies tend to regret that. So my stance is that if you give up your principles when the rubber meets the road, you don't have principles, right? We can't allow the debate to become this mess of shit flinging and just brawling on the streets. Like, I am, to the degree that I am a scientist in my field, or as an entrepreneur, as anybody who cares about, with skin in the game about stuff. When I see that kind of conversation going on in my team, the first thing I do is get everybody to shut up and tell me what's happening factually. And instead of like this kind of emotional, like, oh, you're a terrible person, no, you hate me, you're trying to sabotage my career, whatever. No, we'll adjudicate that after, like, first we map, then we navigate, right? It's pretty simple. You do not navigate without a map.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't just blindly just go in a direction and hope it works out. Maybe it will work out, maybe it won't. And I don't, just seeing this process play out in reality, I don't feel that good about it.
Yeah, well, which is kind of there's a subtle difference, though it kind of seems the same when you were talking about when you have a new idea, where you're going to import some program from a mainframe onto a smartphone, or maybe one of those little pet things that were really popular 20 years ago.
Tamagotchi.
Yeah. And so that is the entrepreneurial spirit, where you are kind of going into uncharted territory, but that doesn't talk about how you're going to implement that. At the same time, you're saying that there are ways where we can want to go into uncharted territory and completely lose the principles that would guide us once we get there, or guide us safely into repelling into some unknown territory. And what you're seeing now is the kind of the people just probably irresponsibly just shoving
the wind, just kind of like prematurely settling on one solution, which is a known flaw in human reasoning. Anything that appears to work, we just kind of like latch onto it, and then sort of push everything else out, right? And that the thing is, I guess the way you're saying this is actually might have some insights, because so what we do in my team, we have little devices, and our original name, it was called Resin because we were the kind of the glue between the software world and the hardware world, right? And what we do all the time is we're creating this new paradigm of how to program these things with principles that we've learned from cloud computing or whatever, but in terms that they work on this new domain. And we're constantly in this interface, right? Because the old school hardware world, right? The people who made your television, your microwave, whatever, think in one way. The cloud computing data center people think another way. And whenever we're trying to mesh these two worlds, there's no rubric, right? You never know who's right about a certain thing, and sometimes they're both wrong. So sometimes you gotta throw both out and make something new. Sometimes you adopt the thing that you found as is, and there's no rule, right? So I'm quite used to living in that sort of uncertain territory and doing integration of paradigms. That's what I've been doing essentially for a decade now. And maybe that's why I feel more comfortable, and it's very clear to me what's happening in the conversation, because I've seen those conversations at a smaller scale in my team. And I feel like this is maybe the most important conversation we could be having this very moment. And this is why I say, look, if I don't jump in now, I don't jump in ever. And what I'm realizing, and maybe some of the tools we've been building at this kind of cross-domain integration of ideas and sort of patterns are coming in handy. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but what you're saying is kind of triggering this insight. I think I'll adopt it. Yeah, I think I'll endorse it live on this stream.
I made my pay for the day. When we were talking earlier, when we were talking about the response that Bret's getting and the oddness of the emotionality, and I was just kind of, what popped in my head was a COVID derangement syndrome. Like this kind of relic that we saw in the Trump era. But when you talk about wartime, or there's a certain state of war or agitation or danger and urgency that people get into that then shuts down reasoning capacity or causes them to cling and be very defensive of their weapon, right? To not even look at their weapon and if it's going to be the right tool for the job. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas on the proper way for people who want to be involved in this and bring more rationality or kind of bring a different tone and meter and methodology to the conversation when conceiving of the people who are being kind of irrational, even if they say that they're very rationalist or that's how they have propped themselves up. What's the proper way in your mind to conceptualize or to think about people like Yuri and Claire and Sam insofar as they're going after Bret in this strange way?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned three people that I've from time to time I've kind of respected and sort of had a lot of positive things to say about it. I still have, especially Sam Harris is somebody that I've learned a lot from, and I agree with on a ton of things. It's fascinating to me that, again, it's not the approach I'm taking is I'm not refuting the heart of what they're trying to claim. I'm pulling the legs from under it because I'm like, you're trying to sell me, a structure. Okay. And the legs are clay, right?
You're willing for Bret Weinstein to be wrong. You're willing
between you and me. I would like him to be wrong because I want to continue running my company, living my life. I have a son, I have a family, I have a team. Our team is in every continent, 20, 30 countries. I've lost count at this point. And I care about all of these people all over the world. Some of my team is saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated until 2023, right? People in Zambia, Nigeria, South Africa, they don't have, the Pfizer sort of vaccine flowing through the roof or whatever, like just the river of vaccination available to everybody. It's a global problem, and it hits different people in different ways. And it's kind of in a way, I feel it's my job to get on top of what's happening. I'm kind of, you said, why on earth would you be doing this? What I don't understand is why on earth everybody else isn't. But that's just I know my reasoning patterns are not typical, so let's leave it at that.
Yeah. But your motivation would be to if this is the correct path of action, this vaccine, the best route of getting that done is to make sure that every I's dotted, T's crossed, and that every counter argument is given its fair due. And insofar as people are going after what Bret might be hypothesizing, you're fine with the counter hypothesis or the falsification of Bret Weinstein's different positions. But every major criticism that you've seen mounted is weak in the leg. So you're actually kind of putting some evolutionary pressure on a counter argument.
Yeah,
to
you
Bret.
could say that. Yeah, I would, yeah, exactly. Like I would like to understand it. I would like to see it. I'm learning a little bit of biology through this, though. The kinds of refutations I'm making on the arguments I'm seeing are not. I try as hard as I can to stay out of the biological field because it's not a field I'm comfortable in, right? So whenever. But by the way, when we say dotting the I's and crossing the T's, we're not saying like let's put every trivial, objection in front of it and just slow it down forever and haha, we're secretly anti-vaxxers, therefore we win, right? Actually, one thing that you'll find interesting, I just put out a poll on Twitter earlier today, which is sort of trying to figure out which of the doubt on the current batch of vaccines that are going out against COVID, what of that doubt is carryover from the legacy anti-vaxxer feeling. And it was fascinating because it was like kind of the people who were questioning vaccines before and are still questioning it is like, of my audience at least, is it good like in the 20s? Like, I don't remember the precise number, like in the 20s. The people who, there were some people who, like 2 or 3% who said they were questioning vaccines, but not now. That's like your random vote, right? Like whatever, sure, this works. There was a 56% of people last I checked that said I was not questioning vaccines before, but now the way with how I'm seeing things, I'm really starting to worry, right? And so that's the thing that people don't get. This is not like the anti-vaxxers are back and in numbers and like are attacking from like Trumpistan or whatever. Like these are people a lot of people aren't speaking out that are just trying to make themselves feel better, and they dig into the data and what they see is really concerning.
Okay, and the methods that are being used against Bret Weinstein by some big players are actually agitating more skepticism out of people.
Well, they're I think they're tapping into that purity mechanism of like saying, this person is going to kill us, right? Pretty much at this point. I mean, when I hear what Sam Harris had to say, this is just me projecting subtext onto what I'm hearing, but it is like this is an emergency. This guy's my friend, but I can't not stand by any longer. I have to say this. And the same thing with the Quillette piece, really. Throwing principles to the wind. Sam Harris is the person who said that he wants to put his opponent's positions in such a way that if they were to hear them, they would say that is a fantastic way to put my interlocutor's position. He did not do that in that podcast. I can guarantee you, not only because Bret said as much, but because it was obvious, and I think even Sam would probably concede that. So, the Quillette, which is like the place where even dangerous ideas are to be spoken about, is coming after. Like, everybody's just throwing the principles out, basically, and just going like haywire. And yeah, that's because I think some sort of purity instinct. This is me hypothesizing now. Right?
Yeah. Something
has been touched. I have to explain this somehow, and I can't really tell you what it is, but something has been touched that is sending people into a mode of enough with the Aspie reasoning shit. We gotta fight now. Like it's fight or flight syndrome. I don't know what it is, but it's like enough with your details. It's fine. We gotta just do this. Get out of the way. At this point, you're dangerous. This is the message coming out. And for me, this is the core of my disagreement. It's like if you don't follow your principles when the rubber meets the road, you don't have principles. It's signaling, right? More like than actual principles.
Mm-hmm. So, just a thought experiment. If it turns out that this is what you're doing now with the betterskeptics.com and the Ground Truth Challenge, do you have like an inkling that this could be some sort of protocol that you could just teach people to do whenever there's some sort of public discourse to have this kind of sieving mechanism? And where did you pull your ideas from? And do you have an idea of organizing them and kind of standardizing this?
So my big thing, right? I started digging into this whole thing from the lab leak, and I'll get where you're going, I promise. The big thing I noticed throughout this pandemic is that the organizational structures we have are framed. They're framed really badly. They're even at the best intents of the people involved. This is why it's misunderstood actually that people are like alleging a massive conspiracy. We're not alleging a massive conspiracy. But what we're alleging is that things are breaking everywhere and everybody's pretending like they're not. And these bad effects are accumulating in ways that are creating terrible sort of sums that doesn't require like a master of puppets somewhere, controlling everything. But the organizations we have, the tools, the mechanisms we have for making sense of the world are all framing it like almost at the same time, from journalism to science to government to for-profits, non-profits, you name it. Mm-hmm. It's all spitting out things that just don't stand up, right? So this is where my sort of mind goes, having built a team and a company that we have been very careful to build our structures internally to not have a lot of these flaws. You probably don't want to go because it's another podcast, but I kind of, this is where my mind goes, that we need to build new kinds of structures for putting people together. I believe people are fundamentally, everybody's the hero of their own story. Nobody gets up from bed in the morning and says, how many millions can I eradicate today? Right?
There's a few, I'm sure.
A couple, yes. Okay, fine. But
statistically speaking.
Yes. It's a bad thing to run to that, to that hypothesis, let's say. Yeah. When you have a problem with somebody, if somebody at your work is annoying you, they're probably not a sociopath. Some people are sociopaths, but, all things being equal, the person who hates you at work, probably something about you is irking them, and if you talked it out, you'd figure it out. But not. Sometimes people are irrational as well. I'm not saying that everybody's being bullied is like it's their fault or anything like that. I'm just saying misunderstanding is the chief mode of chaos in the world. Yeah. Right. Okay. So we can make tools to get people together in a format that makes something better out of inputs that are ordinary. Right. So this mechanism we put out, that's what we put out on GitHub. People can fork it, they can take it away, they can do their own thing. Mm-hmm. We also put out the Google spreadsheet so people can actually see as the referees are going through it. It's fascinating to me that people use that to attack us. They're like, oh, what about this and this? It's like, we literally are opening the door for you to come in. We know that you're going to do this. We don't actually care for your stupid screenshots with the highlights. Like, everybody can see there's version control on the thing. You can literally clone it and look back and see every keystroke, right? Like, that's how it works. People can fork it and do their own critiques as well. They can throw away the referees and make their own judgments, right, on whatever they're seeing, make their own conclusions. We're not saying this is objective truth. And in fact, one of my big issues with all of this is like the whole objective thing used to be, a noble lie or maybe like a rounding of a situation that's like somewhat objective or whatever. Today, when I hear somebody say like, Sam said yesterday, we couldn't have any conceivable conflict of interest. I'm like, even though this is high enough, I'm probably out already because I can conceive of a couple of things, right? If I can conceive of a couple of things, probably somebody else can as well. There's no point trying to get at something from like, I am unbiased. I far more trust people who say, I am biased, right? And here's what I'm biased about. I might be biased about other things I'm not telling you, by the way, right? But here's my process. Here's my facts. Check my math. What do you think? Like, that's what I try to do. That's how my threads are structured. That's how the Better Skeptics Challenge is structured. So this is kind of a V0, if you like, or V1, actually. We're iterating on it. Other people can iterate on it. And we want to make other tools as well. So the idea with Better Skeptics is to be a lab, essentially, for these kinds of sense-making experiments that we deploy in various, not just us, by the way, anyone can deploy. I would love to see this kind of evolutionary thing where there's like variation and re-merging of ideas. We put it out under an open source license that necessitates people share their own variants, right? So we can keep reintegrating ideas. And yeah, I mean, to me, that's the perfect outcome. It's that this tool
a vaccine for chaos.
Do you want to be our marketing department? I feel you're.
You can have that. Just put that under Better Skeptics. Vaccine for chaos.
That's right.
So, speaking of Better Skeptics, though, with the one part of it is this ground truth challenge. What other things are there? Are you planning on doing lectures, or do you know? It seems like you're sitting on something that could possibly be pretty cool.
I
I'm
mean,
just
it'll be
wondering.
great if people engage with it,
Yeah.
try to break it, try to make it better. It kind of bugs me when people are like, "Oh, this is terribly wrong." It's like, it is like literally 3 weeks, this Sunday, or well, yeah, that we 2 weeks Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, I was sitting right here and I was typing up the idea, right, and then we 1 week to make it happen, 1 week to start it, and here we are, and this is extremely new. We'd love for this to become, a thing. Honestly, again, as every institution to me should be able to die, right? Should want it to go away. You should want to solve the problem you're going for and disappear. The point isn't really better skeptics. The point is to create a culture of making new tools,
Yeah.
new mechanisms, new ideas, just try stuff. Like I have this feeling, and I have it in technology, but I absolutely have it in organizational designs. That we have like 3 tools basically, and that's the end of it, right? And recently we've discovered more things. There's Wikipedia with its own challenges. There is open source. There is, remote companies are like a variation on the typical theme. We're trying new things. It's still way too slow by probably orders of magnitude. We could be trying different things, more things. And if it goes by me, we should be trying, thousands of things all the time, because of what is, in my view, possible. Like the really, it's so underexplored. I don't even know which scientific discipline is even trying to look into this problem. Like organizational design, is that even a thing? I don't know. Maybe it exists. Maybe there's a whole discipline of PhDs that are like banging at the screen right now because I completely ignored them. But sorry, guys, like I don't know who you are. Please reach out.
So could you restate that?
Yeah.
What it is that you see the sense makers of the world missing, that you see there's this big gap?
So yeah, let me say it with less animation. So what I'm trying to say is there are ways for people to come together with sets of rules or norms or cultural elements, all sorts of additionals to the people that can create higher value outputs, right? The analogy I use is kind of usually Bitcoin, where the blockchain itself can run on untrusted computers, but somehow there's an alchemy happening, and gold comes in, digital gold comes in. It's like this trustworthy thing, right? I don't, if I bought Bitcoin and it's sitting in a computer, I don't care if it's the NSA or the Chinese Secret Service is running it, because the way that the process works, it cannot be compromised. So that's kind of the idea, is to make mechanisms or tools or systems of all sorts that we can use, we can invoke, we can, if it's long running or, one-offs or whatever, to accomplish things that we seem to be failing at right now, to become more intelligent as a species, basically. Like do things that we can't right now. And usually this, I hope, leads to coming closer to factual matters, right? Like getting closer access to the underlying stratum of reality, rather than sort of collapsing into this sort of he said, she said, what's your degree? You're terrible. I hate you, kind of. And one thing I will add to this is that one thing I've noticed through this just one challenge is that as I try to go for this kind of ground truth, others on the team, the referees, there's this incredible upward pressure. It's like when you're diving, the deeper you go, the more the pressure to go to get you to go back up, to turn it back into characterizations and who are you and why are you saying this, and things that shouldn't matter, but they somehow machinations behind the scenes. I don't want to say too much because it'll ruin the challenge, and it's ongoing. But it's just paranormal phenomena that just wants to get things back into the mud fight, right? And it's fascinating. I did not expect. It's fascinating. Yeah, I don't know what to say. So we got to get more tools and better understood tools, to bring people together, be open about our biases, just be frank, and come together and find solutions to problems.
Yeah, I don't think I try to practice being humane and mature, but there's pressures in me that I get bored of being that way. So if nothing else, just to stir things up, I end up stirring up shit. I try not to do that, but I'm just talking about there's a part of human nature we're never going to get away from, but there are tools that we can still do that can incorporate that or kind of channel that in the right direction? You know, I don't know.
Even so, exactly. Well, this challenge, actually, this is the kind of fun thing, right? Like that it takes people who are passionate about one direction or the other. So the people who are challenging probably are negatively motivated, right? They're like, oh, this. Okay, put it in the river, right? And the people who are defending are also passionate. Like to me, the point is that not only are we not going to get away from these parts of human nature, it's who we are. Like you can't just we're not machines. You can't pull out the subsystem for like outrage. Yeah. We have to flow with it, right? We have to embrace it and incorporate it into the mechanisms that we make to get where we want to. I think this idea, that's why I'm saying like objectivity and all that stuff. This idea that you enter the door of your corporate office and now you are, this suited and booted sort of professional that has no emotions. It's like, who believes that anymore? Like it never worked this way, and it still doesn't. And however much we repeat the mantra, it still won't.
You know, I keep on running into entrepreneurs, and I always get a sense that they're the ones that are going to save the world. And you gave me that feeling today.
Please don't put that on me.
If I pump your ego enough, it'll explode, and then I get to study the blood splatter patterns. Excellent. That's what I'm really into.
I think people should just try their best and stick with their principles. It's so tempting to just round out one corner, round out another corner, save a friend here, save a friend there, but they're not real friends, because if they were real friends, they wouldn't be bothered by that. So.
Well, cool. I think that is, I want to keep it under an hour so that most people will see it. So I'm going to end the recording. Thank you for your time this lovely Sunday.
A pleasure. I'm a long-time viewer. So it's kind of surreal to be inside this magical reality of the voice of reason.
Congratulations for reaching the end of the discussion. If you enjoyed it, do be sure to leave a review or a comment or a thumbs up or whatever you need to do to show that glorious algorithm that this is some good stuff. And do be sure to go and check that back catalog, as it is brimming full of fantastic conversations. Links to provide monetary support are down there in the description as well. Have a good night.